Thank you very much. Delighted to join you here today. If I can acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered today, the Parramatta of the Darug Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past and present for their traditional custodianship of the land. Can I also acknowledge Bishop Anthony Fisher, Otto Henfling, John Aquilino, who's not here anymore, but I know that many of you know him, and somebody who works very hard alongside all of you. Dr. Ian Jackson and Reverend Derek Yule, other presenters and ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to have been invited here today to speak about Parramatta Mission and particularly homelessness in Parramatta and what our organisation is doing about it. At Parramatta Mission, we are essentially providing crisis accommodation, and we also look after people who are living with mental illness. I should probably elaborate on who we are not from the beginning, because we often get mistaken as being part of Mission Australia. We are not. We are a very separate organisation. Our origins go back to Parramatta itself, beginning in 1821, right back to the site just near Lee Memorial Church. We have a very proud history in the Parramatta area, and a history that started pretty much around about the same time as Governor Lachlan Macquarie, right here in this place. Obviously, we've got a lot of expansive community programs, and that will happen when you've been involved with your community for over 190 years. I'll go into some of those things a little bit later. But when you look at Parramatta Mission and our funding, about 64% of it comes from the government, 31% comes from commercial operations, and 5% comes from fundraising. Our vision is a community where all people are included, valued and enabled. And our mission is to transform lives and to grow stronger communities. These are just some of our 70 programs. You'll see things that are very familiar up there, like Lifeline Western Sydney, the HASI program. That's part of Parramatta Mission, and you may know it under the banner as Uniting Care Mental Health. I look after the other area of Parramatta Mission, which is the community services area, and I'll go into that and a lot of the programs a little bit later. But essentially, our services are focused on people who are facing crisis and people that are homeless or at risk of homelessness, and people who are living with mental illness. And we are one of the largest providers of community mental health mental health services in New South Wales. We've got 250 staff and over 400 volunteers across the organisation. And as you've seen before, there are about 70 programs delivered in about 80 sites. My area is the community services, and that's where we start to see the real touching and concerning of the homeless issue in Parramatta and the things that we do. First of all, I'll start with the top. I'm sorry, it's very small writing, but our youth services, and that begins almost as a crisis accommodation first up with a place called Para House. And that's a residential place that provides crisis accommodation, usually six children at one time. Quite young, they can be 14. And also it's a 24-hour, 7-day operation, and kids can come in pretty much at any time of the night. They can stay there for a maximum of 3 months. And we will try to very much provide a very home and stable environment where we do encourage the living skills, the cooking, and starting to generate that level of trust, because obviously when you're dealing with kids that have come from extremely traumatised backgrounds, it's very hard initially to get their trust and to start working with them. But we've had very good results, and when you start to see the work that happens at Para House, and then they can be transitioned into some of our other properties, which are some of our bed sits and also townhouses at Kumpatu, which is an Aboriginal word meaning new beginnings. We can have some of these kids with us for up to a period of 4 years, in which they are able to completely have their lives stabilised, and then they can begin to rebuild their own lives. Sometimes, and I've been very fortunate to have been visiting some of the places where we've had former residents, and there was a very young girl who first came to our attention when she was about 14, and she herself was a young girl who had had over 90 reports to docs as a young person growing up, and she came into our services and we were able to help her along the way. She'd recently had her own baby and had come back to Para House just to say hello to everybody and express thanks and to show off her newborn child. And it was just amazing to see how completely safe she was, because she had then curled up on the lounge with her newborn baby and was just having a bit of a nap. That's how safe she was and confident there with the staff and with her newborn baby. And I'm pleased to say that we've actually worked with another part of a Catholic organisation who has provided more long-term accommodation for her and her child. The next one is the residential induction unit. Now, that's not strictly a homelessness issue, but it's something that Parramatta Mission does, and it's part of the Youth Drug Courts program. I'll touch on that lightly because it's a very significant program. It runs as a part of the Youth Drug Courts. It's pretty much the children who otherwise would be incarcerated, who have committed violent crimes under the influence of drugs. This is their last chance to avoid that correctional system without getting that kind of support along the way. We have our best results when we've been able to work with these kids for up to 5 months. So obviously it's not strictly homelessness, but nonetheless something that Parramatta Mission is incredibly proud to be associated with. The Women and Family and Children Services, Thelma Brown Cottages, that's our domestic violence refuge. Last year there were 55 women who were in that refuge. There are 7 units, 2 bedrooms each. They can accommodate up to 6 children along with the mothers. There were 55 women there last year and over 103 children. And obviously it's a fairly horrific situation where this is what we provide just with seven units, and this is how many people we can accommodate during that time, and that is just strictly crisis accommodation. And we're able to work with people long term and again stabilise them and then help them get into that long-term housing and then work with other providers in order to do that. Alongside that, with the women's services, we've got Kelly's Cottages. That's also for women. That's 12 bed sits for single women, and they can come from a range of issues, whether they themselves have mental health issues or that they have become unemployed. Again, we try to work with people to stabilise them, to get them into long-term housing. This is essentially crisis accommodation to transitional housing, and then we work with other providers or the Department of Housing for their long-term housing strategies.